Foundation Board. And Baldrige runs through my blood, and now I'm passionate to belong to this Communities of Excellence effort as well. Should you both probably introduce yourself first? To find the mic.
Yeah. I'm Max Summers. I head up the Regional Vitality Effort, which is a pilot site in Missouri for Communities of Excellence.
I'm Stephanie Norling. I'm the Managing Director for Communities of Excellence, and I'm based in San Diego, California.
Wonderful. And thank you all for coming. I know this is the first session on day 2. So late game last night. Anybody have Villanova? Sure. Yeah, a couple of 2 of them. Great. That was a great game.
Every game should have gone up.
Didn't it?
They won.
It was a great game. So thank you for choosing this session so early in the morning. This is an important topic, I think, for all of us, because it affects our communities across the country and across the land. And I'm going to tell the story that probably is best told by the gentleman who just sat down in the front row. Not to call you out, Lowell Cruz, but many of you in the room may know Lowell. He was up on, not this stage, but the bigger stage 8 years ago, 7, 8 years ago?
2009.
7 years ago. When Heartland Health received the Baldrige program, he was CEO, now retired, of that fine organization. And he and another fellow Baldrige recipient, Rick Norling, who was CEO of Premier, remember that organization, about the same time frame, won Baldrige. And I think as the story goes, Lowell, that it was a bottle of wine, maybe a bottle and a half, there were 2, okay, rounding up. They hatched this idea, and both of them clearly passionate about Baldrige, knowing that it works to improve organizational outcomes. They said, I wonder if this framework could be used to improve community outcomes. Our communities are really struggling. We're struggling in terms of community health. We're struggling in terms of educational outcomes. We're struggling in terms of, think about the economy in 08, 09. We need help. Baldrige works within organizations. Might it work within a community setting where there is no one CEO? There's dozens of them, hundreds of them, thousands of them, depending on the size of the community. But it's a system. It's a system approach that we know improves outcomes of organizations. What a better technique than to try a system approach to improving a very complex system within communities. So they came up, did you get that? There it is. They came up with this hypothesis that the Baldrige framework could be applied to addressing community challenges, community problems, and to improve community outcomes. And originally, I think, Lowell, your target was community health at first. And with further thinking over the years, now it's expanded to include education and economic vitality, because those 3 are so intertwined. And in conversations, we'll hear the San Diego story here in a second, safety has now been added. Could be part of community health, or it could be a standalone outcome that that community is trying to achieve. You could put a lot of different outcomes on there, and I think that's some of the power of the thinking here, is the communities themselves can determine what's key, much like organizations do in the organization profile in Category 7. What are the key metrics? What are the key outcomes we're trying to achieve as a community? So at least these 3, possibly more outcomes, could be improved by using the systems approach in communities of excellence. And by the way, 2026, does anybody know what that stands for? Other than World War I, these folks. It's our nation's 250th anniversary. So the hope here is really to try to improve the quality of this land for the next 250 years. I kind of alluded to some of this. We're doing this because nothing else has worked. I mean, we have elected officials trying to set policy at this level. This really is a grassroots effort to try to influence outcomes at the community level. And it really is, the design of this, the theory of this, is really to start thinking more collaboratively about how decisions are made within communities with formal and informal leaders. It's thinking about community strategic planning and reallocating resources. You think in any size community, all the efforts that are trying to attack community issues in a fragmented, uncoordinated way, you might have 10, 12, 15 organizations trying to attack a problem over here, but not really in a coordinated way. The waste that creates in terms of resources. So the thinking here is that we can address these community challenges, we can improve community outcomes, we can optimize community resources by laying Baldrige on top of the community. Communities of Excellence 2026 is a standalone nonprofit, but it's now beginning to collaborate very heavily with other important resources. The Baldrige program itself has been very involved with this effort for almost a year now. Because obviously the Baldrige criteria that we know it works in organizations needs to be adapted for community setting. The language needs to change slightly because you don't have a CEO. It's a leadership system, a more collaborative integrated leadership system. And it needs to be positioned in terms of community rather than organization. So you see a picture of it here, and behind this, I think there's one slide. Julie and I are sorry, you can't see it. We're beginning to tweak the language of how the criteria would change in a community setting. And when was this, late last summer, early last fall, I think it was? Ellen Garshik, who's sitting in the back of the room, was lending her expertise from the Baldrige program, working with Stephanie and I, to begin to adapt the framework in a community language. And we're now beginning to conduct focus groups within 2 pilot communities. And the 2 that have raised their hand are San Diego County, we'll hear their story here in a second, and Northwest Missouri, which is a collection of 18 counties in the northwest part of Missouri around the St. Joe area. They've now had a crack at this framework a couple of times, actually, and we're beginning to tweak the language to better fit their needs. Very different regions, obviously. A very complex, urban, highly dense area in San Diego County, one of the most populated areas in the country, and very rural agricultural northwest Missouri that is struggling economically. I think I learned last week 16 out of the 18 counties are not growing. So very different set of dynamics. And again, we believe Baldrige can help both with their challenges and their advantages. So now we're going to take this into pilot in both of those communities, and hopefully eventually many other communities, to begin to test these concepts, practice what the criteria are telling, let leaders begin to use them to make decisions and to improve outcomes, and we'll learn from them. These pilots will take at least a couple of years as we begin to tweak the criteria and learn how they need to be implemented within communities. So that's some background. We're going to hear 2 stories of 2 of these pilot communities and how they're beginning to use them and interpret the criteria for their use. The first one is Northwest Missouri.
It's an honor to be with you. But I want to tell you, rural America has a challenge. Inner city America has a challenge. They're not very different. I'm going to talk about rural America, but most of the principles could be applied to the inner city. And we're leaving those behind as a society, writing them off. That is wrong, and I'm here to tell you it doesn't need to be that way. And Baldrige is an answer that provides a structure so that people can bootstrap their way out of it. And that's the opportunity before us. But there are serious challenges. If you think about it, we are, the region we're talking about, the 18 counties, 100 miles long, 50 miles wide, made up of many high schools who play ball on Friday night and oppose each other routinely. And we're asking them to work together. That's not natural behavior. We started Regional Vitality, which is the core effort locally, and we did a number of research. We studied transfer of wealth, we did an entrepreneurial assessment, we did listening sessions across the region. We did a number of research projects. What we learned, the bottom of at the end of the day, is we had a very long list of what we need to do. But what's wrong with that? We have no structure to do that. And we have no capability to really come together to do that. That's what's missing, at least in rural America. I can't speak to the inner city. But in our region, that's what we're using Baltimore for, to put that framework in place so that our rural area can help itself. Because nobody's going to come in on a white horse and help us. We know that. If we don't help ourselves, we'll just watch it diminish away. Over the last few years, we've lost a lot of population. That has impacts on our schools, that has impacts on our businesses, it has impacts on society in general, and it lowers the quality of life. If I can figure it out. So what the problem is, we have an ocean of silos. You could go over the region. I picked education, but I'm not picking on education. I just happen to say education's in a silo. Healthcare's in a silo. You take any sector, they're in a silo. They operate as if they are the only ones that matter. And what we're trying to do is take Baldrige and say, can we connect these islands? Can we connect this to where we can get to holistic solutions? Because what we understand very well is if you're going to solve this problem, you're going to deal with 5 pillars: quality of life, educational assessment, entrepreneurship, business development, and workforce. And so what we're driving is to build a structure so that we can think those through all together. And we can go across silos so that we can build comprehensive strategies so that we, as a region, have competitive advantages. And that's easy for me to stand up here and tell you that. And it's easy for me to say we'll use Baldrige criteria to do that. But when you look at a community, there is a fundamental difference. And that fundamental difference is communities don't have senior leadership teams. And that's the concept I want you to walk away from this meeting with, because that's what we're wrestling with in northern Missouri. There is a team out of Stanford and Harvard that has developed a concept called system leadership. We have studied it, and we believe it will solve this problem. And we're going to go forward and pilot it. So in a year or two, we'll know a lot more than we know today. In general, communities are going to do what's in their best interest, and you're not going to take that away from them, nor are we going to try. So what we're asking is that the communities, to replace the senior leadership, form a roundtable that is in neutral turf so that they can make a single decision like a CEO would that's in the best interest of the community. One of our communities chose to put this in a 501c3. And that way they have an official way to come together, but it is neutral turf. That's what matters. It must be neutral turf. And then we want to develop and train what's called system leaders. Now, system leaders is nothing new to Baldrige, because that's exactly what you advocate. The only difference between a system leader and any other leader is when they come to this table, they must think about the good of the whole. They cannot bring their selfish interest to this table. Because the instant they do, we get into politics and you destroy the whole system. So we're going to put all of these leaders through training so that they know how to think in systems and they know how to honor the good of the whole. And then all of the other principles would be the same as what you would advocate in the criteria. And then each of these communities will come to a second table that's also neutral turf, but the decisions are made at the community level, not at the second tier. The second tier is the region itself. And if you notice, it's got all the regions around and then the region system leadership. All we're doing at this top table is saying, are you in or out? We never vote no. You never vote a community in, you never vote a community out. It's always, are you in or out? If 3 say we're in, and 3 say we're not out on this decision, then we know who's in, and we go forward with that group. So it's neutral turf all the way, good of the whole, every step of the way. So how does this work? And this graphic's on the back table if you want it. But I want you to concentrate with me, and this is a bit difficult to grasp, but I want you to grasp the concept. If you go up to the top, system leadership, that's that regional graphic that we just had. What that is we will bring ideas from, on the far right-hand side, you see 6 regions. Those are the same 6 regions that were around the circle. And on the other side, we have added our research capabilities. We want this to be data-driven. We want this to be focused on what does the data say? What is the opportunity? What's the size of the opportunity? All the things that you would do if you were a company. So we're creating a research unit that will build a profile, that will do the research, and that platform will also be neutral. They have no agenda except to provide data. We have the regions over there who do have an agenda to represent their community, and we have a system leadership up at the top who has no agenda except to get to a decision. So if a region has an idea, they bring it up to the system table, they say, we think this is a good idea. Anybody else interested? The answer is yes or no. If they're interested, we send it around to the research unit and say, research this idea, let's see what the opportunity is, and we'll bring it back at this given time. And so then when they get through researching, they'll take it back, they'll put it on the system table and say, here's what this looks like after we researched it. Do we want to go for it? If the answer is yes, then we go the other way and we turn it into a project. That system leadership has an obligation to make sure the projects stay aligned. And we will train them to that skill. So the arrows over on the right-hand side are simply, these are the projects we have decided to go with on a regional basis, and we're going to move those forward. Each of those has a team in charge, and they would be carrying it forward. What's unique about this is nobody's in charge at the system leadership. It is the system itself that drives that. That's the concept of difference. And it's the only way we think a community will ever come together, because they have to trust that if I go to this table, I'm not going to get hurt. They have to believe that. And they have to know the other people at the table are there in earnest and genuine in their decision making. We believe if we can do this, and we are going to do this, that over a period of time, we will develop a set of leaders, trained, who will think of the good of the whole, who will drive the principles of Baldrige across the region, and it'll become the way we do business. And the reason we believe that is in our area, everyone understands the problem. I or anyone else has to explain the problem. It is well understood. That is halfway home in our case. And so they know we have to find a solution. Finding it is a different issue, and that's what we're bringing forward, the response we've had so far. We're going to do 2 pilots of these regions to start with, and those have been identified, and we are now starting to work with those 2 pilots. Once they're up and we understand how that goes, we'll come back in behind that and develop the other 4 regions, or what we believe to be 4 regions. They're a little tougher. These 2 pilots are down the road a ways. And so we will develop these 6 regions first, and then we'll develop the system leadership. But where the real opportunity comes is it something that's not even shown on there. What we're in the process of doing is hooking our region onto the engine of the urban economic power. And what we will do when we get there is we will simply say, here's what we want. What do we need to tie into the urban areas? If it's a cluster, where's this cluster located? And what do we need to do? And we simply go out and study that cluster, or study that shared value, or study whatever we're studying, and we'll understand the perimeters. It's the customer requirements. And we're going to identify what are the requirements they would have. We'll come back into our region and we'll say, if you want to do that, you will need to do these things. Can we do it, or are we prepared to do it? If not, we'll get ourselves organized around it and into a position where we can do these things. And over time, we'll create competitive advantages within our region, within specific opportunities.
Thank you, guys. Now, I hope you guys don't mind, but I'm going to stay seated. Now, I'm going to talk about San Diego County, which has a very notable contrast to what Max just told you about Northwest Missouri. San Diego County, our pilot community there is actually a jurisdiction that's driving this effort. So what we're talking about is using the government as a facilitator to bring all of our partners together and make improvements in the community. Live Well San Diego, which began as a health initiative called Building Better Health in 2010, is based out of the San Diego County Health and Human Services. And the vision itself, coming from the government, was pretty easy for the community to get behind, because who doesn't care about health? Who doesn't care about being safe? And who doesn't care about thriving? And so that was something that they knew that as a county, as Health and Human Services, that they could do to bring their community together. However, achieving this, if you think about it, required them going much beyond what the typical scope of government is. So as background, like I said, Building Better Health adopted in 2012. It proved to be a very successful initiative, and over time they added living safely and thriving to this initiative. And it became to the point where the county adopted it as the county-wide vision for San Diego. So the vision for San Diego County is a healthy, safe, and thriving San Diego. I think that's pretty powerful, and it's a vision for a whole county that anyone can get around. The reason they did this is that San Diego, much like the rest of the nation, was facing a tidal wave of chronic diseases. In particular, where we're piloting, which is the South region, you can see on the map, it's bordered by Mexico to the south, San Diego to the north, oceans to the east, and mountains to the west. And they have some of the lowest high school graduation rates in the county and some of the highest rates of premature death from chronic disease. It's a pretty significant area. There's about 3.2 million people in San Diego County. So the South region alone has, I believe, about 450,000 people. And I don't remember exactly how many Northwest Missouri has.
261,000.
261,000. So we're talking about a very large population here. So what Health and Human Services does is they break the county into these 6 service regions that you see here. And each of these regions is also a Live Well San Diego region. And so each one is led by a regional manager that brings together teams of community stakeholders. And these stakeholders are also called Live Well partners, are made up of schools, cities, businesses, nonprofits, faith-based organizations, military organizations, veteran organizations, you name it. Basically, any organization that wants to join Live Well San Diego and work towards supporting their vision for a healthy, safe, and thriving San Diego is welcome to participate. So these teams come together. That's pretty fuzzy, isn't it? These teams come together regularly to meet in each region, and basically they discuss community improvement plans to help improve the priorities of each of these different regions. So as I talked about the South region, all these regions of San Diego are very different, and they're different in what their priorities are and what their needs are and what their partnering organizations that work together are. So they serve as the central point for planning, for prioritization, and for how they address the different priorities that come together. Now, within Health and Human Services, the county and staff incorporate the Live Well vision into their daily activities and routines and integrate them into their key policies. So you have the county government, and then you have the community working together to both advance the same vision. To do this, they really had to change the way that they do their day-to-day work and redefine what their priorities as a governmental organization were. They're basically the steward of health, safety, and wellness. It works. So I think government can serve as a natural facilitator because they do touch all of the sectors involved in a community. They work with residents, they work with cities, they work with hospitals, with schools, etc. So they serve that function well, but the danger is when they become a leader. That's not the position that they want to be, or that really helps thrive. And so what they do is that every Live Well partner who joins has the freedom to decide how they spread the Live Well vision. So they come together, they discuss the issues, they discuss options for how they can all work together, but then each partnering organization goes back to its own organization and decides what they're going to do to spread the vision within themselves. This does embody communities of excellence, though, because what we're doing is we're bringing people together. We're trying to figure out how to move the needle on these certain indicators, these key issues that San Diego knows that they have to address. And basically, to use the analogy, we're trying to get all the oars in the boat to row in the same direction. That is what communities of excellence is about. And when you think about health, safety, and thriving, it's not that every sector that's involved has to touch all 3 of those, because they're not always going to. But they all intersect, and we know that they do. And so we know that if you don't have a safe way to get to a park, or if you don't have a safe park, you can't exercise and you can't promote health. I mean, I think we could go on and on about examples of how interconnected these sectors are. The other thing that I think is important about Live Well San Diego is that they recognize very strongly the role that the business world has to play in this effort. And in a perfect world, I think that what we would like to see is the CSR activities of businesses aligning with the community's vision. And so when we know Live Well San Diego, we know the vision for the community, we know the needs for the community, how powerful would it be if you saw the businesses in that community also aligning their CSR programs with that? The other thing about Live Well San Diego and the other thing about communities of excellence is that we recognize that no one entity can do this alone. And we also understand that everyone can share in the results. And that's what we want. We want this being an inclusive, community-owned effort. So the way that Communities of Excellence is going to work with Health and Human Services is that we're going to recognize that Health and Human Services is not the leader. We don't want government to be the leader. So we're going to bring in the processes. We're going to bring in the systematic approaches so that everyone's doing everything the same way. And like I said, people can still do their own thing. They have the freedom to choose how much they participate and join. But a key to this is that Live Well San Diego has already done a lot of hard work in bringing this community together. They've put in years and years of effort to get to the point where they are, where there's almost 200 partners in Live Well San Diego that participate in advancing this vision. And we want to make sure that the successes that they've had to date and the successes of bringing an operational framework like the Communities of Excellence framework can be replicable in other jurisdictions across this country. And this is about making incremental changes and impact. In 1 or 2 years, we may not see a whole lot of change, but this is about improving the health and welfare of our residents. And so any change, anything that we can do to impact that is meaningful. And this is a long-term effort. So after our two-year pilot phase, this will be embedded in the community. This will continue well past the 2 years that we're working with them. And that's a key to what Communities of Excellence is trying to do, is make this a community-owned, community-driven, sustainable effort. And that's one of the powers of the Baldrige framework. Now, what's very helpful is that Health and Human Services in San Diego is on a Baldrige journey internally. So they recognize that if you don't know what you're doing internally, it's harder to make the impact externally. So I think that's a very big deal to what we're doing as well. Internally, their focus is on mission, vision, strategy, and voice of the customer. And that supports all that they're trying to do in the community, because if they understand who their customers are, they understand how to better serve them. And it's also important to note that they're not just a facilitator, but they're another entity. They're a partner in this. And so we need to recognize that and treat them that way as well. I want to point out, because I'm very excited about it, that the South region where we are piloting is now a bi-national effort. This coming Thursday, and I'll be attending the event in Tijuana, Mexico, they're going to recognize their first international Live Well San Diego partner. And so, and that's significant in San Diego because there are many people from Mexico that work in San Diego every day. It's one of the largest border crossing in the world, I think. And there's many people that live in San Diego that work in Mexico. And so to recognize that and to help facilitate this level of collaboration is key. And I think is very exciting for our future and our prospects. So to get a little more general, because you've heard Max talk about one approach that we're doing, I'm just going to show you a bit about what success looks like in a community. So you can see here, what we're really looking for is this collaborative leadership structure composed of diverse community leaders. We want engagement across the whole community, sectors, generations, collectively making shared decisions, combining resources, and working towards a shared goal. We would like to see permanent adoption of the Communities of Excellence framework and benchmark status in these key outcomes compared to similar communities. I think that it's important for Baldrige winners and communities to provide support to what we're doing. They're in the position to best understand and help in this effort. Nonprofit hospitals in particular, I think, can play this role very well because they already have community health improvement plans. They already have a lot of this information and understanding. And Communities of Excellence needs volunteer judges, examiners, and trainers. And these are the perfect people to help work with us. So Since the criteria itself is in the form of questions and it's not prescriptive, there's all different kind of approaches that can be used to address this. We've already shown 2 of them here, and we know that as we expand our communities, we'll have different approaches that continue to be exhibited. But what we've come to learn from our experience in Northwest Missouri and our experiences already in San Diego is that there's really real value in this criteria, and that all of these approaches are guided by a strategic plan. They all require leadership, they all require facilitation, and they all can benefit from the use of this criteria. So we've already proven that it's applicable across 2 very diverse opportunities, and we are very excited for the future and the opportunity to continue to spread this across the country. Thank you.
Great. So now what? We do questions, I think.
We do questions.
I can figure out how to operate this.
This is a brand new effort. This is in its pilot phase, so we just wanted to open it up to questions.
You're in right there. I'm gonna get my exercise.
This is really exciting. I'm curious to see, the lessons learned that comes from your experience. And when we're talking about communities, I'm very curious about your relationship with faith-based communities, specifically churches, because they are really, huge influencers in communities. And so, how large of an influence do churches play in both of your models, and how do you reach out to them? How do you get them engaged?
I talked about the kind of the round table where we bring everybody together. Churches would be one of the entities that would need to be at that table. Churches are very important, and we're very concerned about the churches because it's one of the things that's in decline, partly because of population and partly because we're moving away from faith. We're not going to solve the latter problem, we can solve the first part of that problem. But churches also play important roles within the community itself. And so they are a player, they are important, and they will be at the table. How they choose to organize themselves will be their decision. What we're asking each community to do is you have to form a round table of all the interest in this community, and they have to be capable of making a decision. Churches would be part of that. So it's not about the church, it's about the community that church sets in when they get to the table.
Yeah, and I would add that within Live Well San Diego and its partners, one of our roles will be to meet with all of the current partners and identify who isn't here, who isn't at the table that's representing this community, and equally faith-based partners would be a part of that. And they often serve as really good convening roles, as gathering places for community members, and so it's definitely a key.
This is great, so thank you very much for presenting. All the things you talk about really come under sort of the population health concept, that all parts of society have a role in population health, and Robert Wood Johnson's culture of health, sort of same thing, bring everybody to the table. The part that I like, for example, next week we have 60 people coming to talk about things like this, but 60 organizations. That senior leadership piece, I think once you get past that point, how we do it is kind of what we're all trying to do, how we get businesses to use the community benefit dollars to fund some things. Not so much what you decided was government, because we're struggling with that in Hudson County, New Jersey. For those of you who don't know Hudson County, there are many books on us around politics. But in the rural community, how did you decide how to build, are those senior leadership, and how did you decide how that box gets built? Because that's the part I don't quite know how to do.
We don't decide that. The community itself decides that. That's why it has to be a neutral table, and they have to be able to make a decision that's community-wide, and they will, within the community, decide who represents each of these silos. So the first decision you have to make is what is the silos, and the second decision, how do we get those silos represented at this table? That is a local decision. We don't intervene in that. That is their decision. Because that community has to be comfortable with that approach. Where we come in, we help them do the training, we help them put the systems in place, but we don't tell them what to do. They decide that. We want them to do it around neutral. 501c3 was a good model and one community that did it that way. The other communities may choose a different model. All we care about is neutral territory.
If I can add into this too, an emerging potential third community is Rochester, Minnesota, which is why I was invited to the conversation a couple years ago. And we had a dialogue as recent as last week that included the mayor, city council president, county board chair, school superintendent, chancellor of the university in town, chamber president, foundation president, I'm probably missing. And the very first question they're dealing with is who should be at the table. And if you go back to the community profile, it's actually, we've adapted this a little bit. There is no P1A0 in Baldrige, for those of you that know that. What is your community? I mean, really, that is the first place to start, and who should be at the table. And they are trying to determine, is this countywide? Is this multi-county like Missouri's done? Because they have a geographic area as well that pulls workers in and so forth. So I think that is the first question, is who should be at the table. And they know that the leadership group has to expand, but they're trying to grapple with some of these questions first before they expand the dialogue.
And we have all those people at the table. You know, we have almost 1 million people in the county, Jersey City. And it was a great meeting last year, and everybody bought on board. So now it's another year later,
Yeah.
and nothing's really moved. So everybody agrees that they like each other, and they'll all be in it. You know, with
Yeah.
the presidents and CEOs and everybody's there. But he said senior leadership box.
Yeah, that is the key. Well, and this is where I personally believe Baldrige may be different than some of the other models that are out there, because it really does require systematic approaches. When we were having conversations, not this last week, but a couple of years ago, some executives at Mayo Clinic in Rochester said, why I like this so much is that it's permanent. It's not an event. It's not a community strategic planning event that all of our communities have, and then you go away and a year later you have come back for more donuts. I mean, this is the way the community will make decisions and allocate resources.
And we're doing one other thing that I didn't cover, and that is communication. When we have a project on the table, what we will ask each community to do is to register in a common database who is interested in what we're doing and what is their area of interest. When we have a project on the table, we will send it out to those people who said, I'm interested in this area. And then when that topic is being discussed, they're free to come to the meeting, because it's an open forum, nothing behind closed doors. It is always open to anybody who wants to walk in the room and talk about it. That is part of the rules of this. You close the door and you're going to have trouble. So we send it out to them ahead of time. They know what the issue is, and if they're interested, they can come.
I just wanted to add one thing to this conversation too, is that one of the keys to the 2-year pilot phase is not just to work with communities and receive feedback on the framework itself. That's key, is getting this framework fully refined and tested for future use. But it's also understanding all the processes that go with it. It's understanding the different leadership models and the recommendations, the communication system, the data platform. Those are all keys to helping support communities in the future as well, and we'll be doing that.
Thanks, Brad. If Kay has a question, then come up to her.
My question is, how on earth are you able to keep this apolitical? I think it's fabulous, but that's my huge concern.
We don't know for sure we can, but I can tell you it won't work unless we do. I know that. And what we have to do is, our purpose of training, there's a set of facilitators, of training those facilitators to first think systems, and second, to think in terms of good of the whole. And anytime they see the conversation moving away from those two things, we'll ask them to intervene. Because we're going somewhere we don't want to go. We haven't put this in practice yet, so I can't sit here and tell you it will work, but that's how we're managing it now. And that's part of the pilot, and we think if we can get those facilitators to really believe that, and we think they will through training, and then we're going to put coaches with each of the communities to reinforce it and say, you know, you're really destroying this, and let me show you why. To teach them what their own behaviors do into the project. So we're going to have training and coaches, and the coaches will stay with those communities and with those roundtables, and they will tell them when they're off. So we got a kind of a double shield against that. It's yet to be determined whether it'll work.
So we enter the gentleman here, and if we have time, Paul, I'm watching the clock.
When and how can we view the sample criteria language?
Thank you for asking, Joanne, who is also a Communities of Excellence board member. Our plan, and please don't hold me to this date, but our goal is to have this posted on our website by April 18th. And what I plan to do is if you sign up for our email list, and you can do that at our website, COE2026.org. We'll send an email to everyone with the link to it, so you can view it. And what's really important to us is that we want broad engagement. We want feedback from people like you on the criteria. So we'll make sure that we have opportunities for you to comment and for you to share your thoughts with us on the framework.
So, thank you. And I have a request of Lowell, whatever wine it was that you and Richard were drinking, let us know, because obviously it's something we should all drink more of. Thank you. And also, just a comment about the difference between this and some other great work which people are doing in communities around the country, which is part of your awesome story. But you know, Move the Mountain, Strive for Thrive, things like that are going in great communities are extraordinary efforts. But what I love about what you're doing in two different settings, but it's much the same, is this notion of empowering the communities to assume the leadership role and to drive the process. And you're just giving them the framework. So I love that. I'm in healthcare. If you don't mind commenting, if you would, on what you envision our role in healthcare is relative to support of education, providing jobs, things like that. What can we do to help?
I'd like to ask Brian to answer.
Yeah, the healthcare expert. Stephanie alluded, I think healthcare is at the center of most communities, regardless if you have a massive complex system or a small clinic. So I think healthcare has to get involved. And I think healthcare leaders have to determine how that is. Certainly it's to impact community health, but what else can you do to feed the economic engine of that community and education and so forth? So like good Baldrige examiner, it depends. I think the community leaders themselves have to determine what role the community players are going to have. How's that for a non-answer? All right, one more question I think is Paul, and if we have time, yes? Yeah, I will. As I'm walking, Lowell said, can you mention the 7th sector goal? The goal here, and Stephanie alluded to it too, is that eventually this becomes a 7th sector along with manufacturing, small business, healthcare, education, and so forth. So that we have examiners trained to evaluate the strength of communities, and there will be trophies given at Quest for Excellence for communities that are high performing. And I think we're a ways away from that, but that is the goal, is to get more communities involved, more best practices shared across the nation of what's working within the community. Paul.
You know, I'm one of those examiners and Baldrige advocates that just loves hearing about something like this that can make a significant impact. The thing that concerns me is, you know, with the Baldrige article about the communities of excellence, you know, talk about the focus is getting the system in place, including fundraising to support leadership, a communication system, and a data platform. And then I hear about coaches and facilitators. Are people willing to step up and put money into this? Number one, kind of the very specific to communities of excellence. And then, is this being set up in a way that it's going to help drive sustainability of the Baldrige program so that organizations that are involved in these communities are recognizing the value of the Baldrige model so that it isn't just one more one-off that isn't driving sustainability of this program that we all love?
I can try to answer those, and then Max, you can go ahead and fill in. To the first part of the question, you know, fundraising is always a challenge, no matter what you're doing. In particular, with something that's brand new. And though all of us in this room probably very strongly believe in Baldrige, and we know that Baldrige is proven and validated, we don't have that in communities yet. So, you know, there are certain investments that have to go into community to help drive this. Depending on the community, for instance, Northwest Missouri has very little of the infrastructure needed in place already. San Diego County, because we're working with Health and Human Services, has much of it. And so they're helping us drive the effort, and they're helping support a lot of the pieces like communications and data. So in that sense, it depends on the community. And the key to this is understanding what they already have and then what they need, and then helping to fundraise specifically for that. To drive the sustainability though, one is that the community does need to own this. You know, we're a facilitator. We're helping this in the pilot phase, but we intend to give this to communities to help them determine their own future and outcomes.
We're out of time.
I want to say your question's right on. That is our concern. You hit it almost dead on. But I think what we have to do is we have to sell the idea, the cost of not doing this. Because I can tell you, not doing this is far more expensive than doing it. We just have to sell that concept to people. And if anybody who thinks it through will see that this is a low-cost approach compared to doing nothing.
And the punctuation mark I'll add to that, Max, a little whisper in my ear, I was going to say this as well, but maybe not as good as you just did. The resources are already there. I firmly believe philosophically this is reallocating resources that are already in the community. And if you think about the waste that are within all of our organizations, this is why Baldrige works, right? It helps optimize what's already going on. If you write that to the macro level within communities, I believe this becomes self-funding. It needs investment to start, but then over time, it becomes self-funding.
Stephanie, didn't you have someone in San Diego offer you an in-kind person to help you recently?
We're working with a foundation called Foothold that trains community fellows as collaborative leaders, and so it's a heavily subsidized option for us. It's helping us out.
We are out of time. We could go all day. This is very exciting. Thank you.